Welcome. You are here now, and that is the only thing that matters tonight. There is nothing else required of you. Nothing waiting, nothing unfinished, nothing that needs your attention before morning arrives. You have come to the end of your day, and the end of the day is a soft and generous place, a place that belongs entirely to rest, entirely to you, entirely to the quiet and unhurried process of letting go of everything you have been carrying and allowing your body and your mind to do what they already know how to do, which is to rest deeply and completely, without any effort from you at all. Take a moment to feel where you are lying. Feel the surface beneath you, how it accepts your weight without any resistance, how it holds you completely, how it has been waiting for you without any impatience, simply ready, simply there. Feel your body pressing down into that surface, your shoulders, your back, your legs, the back of your head, and let that pressing down become a little more complete, a little more released, as though you are setting down something you have been carrying all day, and the surface beneath you is receiving it gladly, holding it, asking nothing in return. Your shoulders can drop now, just that last small degree that they sometimes hold without your knowing. Your jaw can release, if it has been holding. Your hands can open, your fingers uncurl, your arms lie flat and still and entirely purposeless, because there's nothing for them to do tonight, nothing for any part of you to do except to rest, which your body already knows how to do perfectly, which it has been doing every night of your life, which requires nothing from you except that you allow it. Tonight I am going to tell you about a farm in the 19th century, somewhere in the middle of England, or perhaps in the rolling countryside of the American Midwest, in a time when farming was done slowly, by hand and by horse, when the days were long and the work was physical and the pace of everything was set by the seasons and the weather and the patient, unhurried rhythms of the natural world. It is a modest farm, not a grand estate, not a dramatic landscape, just a working farm of perhaps 100 acres, with a farmhouse and a barn and a dairy and a few smaller outbuildings, surrounded by fields that are in different stages of the agricultural year, some planted, some fallow, some being prepared. The people who live on this farm are ordinary people living ordinary lives. They rise early and work steadily and eat their plain meals and go to bed when the day is done. Their days are repetitive, their tasks returning in the same order week after week, season after season. There's no drama here. There's no conflict. There's only the farm and its rhythms and the slow, steady, deeply satisfying work of tending to it. You do not need to remember anything I tell you tonight. You do not need to follow every word or hold on to any detail. Simply let the story drift past you, the way the smell of hay drifts past you on a warm summer morning, the way the sound of a distant cow drifts across a quiet field, there and then gone, and leaving something pleasant in the air behind it. Before we go to the farm, take one slow breath. Breathe in through your nose, gently, feeling your chest and belly rise just slightly, and then breathe out through your mouth, long and even and completely, letting everything go with that breath. Every thought you were carrying, every small unfinished thing, every plan and every worry, and every piece of the day that has been following you. Just breathe it all out slowly, and let the next breath come in clean and easy, and let your breathing settle into whatever rhythm it finds on its own, which is the right rhythm, which requires nothing from you. Your body is growing heavier now. Your legs are heavy. Your arms are heavy. The back of your head is heavy against your pillow. There's a warmth gathering in you, the warmth of rest beginning, the warmth of the day releasing its hold on you, the warmth of a body that is doing exactly what it is meant to do at this hour. Let that warmth spread. Let it move from the center of you outward, slowly, gently, reaching your feet and your hands and the top of your head in its own time, the way warmth from a kitchen stove spreads through a farmhouse on a cold morning, not all at once, not dramatically, just steadily, warmly, in its own good time. The farm is waiting for us. It exists in the early morning of a day in the middle of the 19th century, somewhere in a landscape of gently rolling fields and low hedgerows and old trees and the particular quietness of the countryside before the world has fully woken. The sky above the farm is the deep gray blue of the very early morning, The star still visible in the darkest part of the sky overhead, but fading at the eastern horizon, where the first, very faint suggestion of dawn is beginning to thin the darkness into something that is not yet light, but is no longer quite night. The farmhouse sits at one end of the farm lane, a low building of warm brick and tile, its chimney stacks rising above the roofline, its windows dark at this hour. Around it, close to it, the farm buildings are gathered, the large timber barn to one side, the dairy to the other, the smaller building for tools and equipment, the pigsty at the far end of the yard, the chicken house, the well with its wooden frame and its rope and bucket. Beyond all of these, reaching in every direction, the fields, pale and dark in the early morning, their surfaces different from each other. The plowed field one texture, the pasture another, the kitchen garden beside the house a small, enclosed, well-tended patch of darker soil. And in the farmhouse, in the small bedroom at the top of the narrow staircase, a farmer named George is beginning to wake. George is a man of perhaps 50, lean and weathered in the particular way of men who have spent most of their lives outdoors, his hands large and calloused, his face creased and brown, his hair thinning and going gray at the temples. He has been a farmer all his life, on this farm, which was his father's farm before him and his grandfather's before that, and the farm and its rhythms are as familiar to him as his own body, as natural and unremarkable as breathing. He lies still for a moment after waking, as he always does, not because he needs to gather himself or overcome any reluctance to begin, but simply because the moment of lying still before the day begins has its own value, its own quiet completeness, and he has always allowed himself this moment, always taken these few minutes of warmth and stillness as the day gathers itself outside the bedroom window. His wife, Ellen, is still asleep beside him, her breathing slow and even, her form beneath the heavy cotton counterpane completely still. Ellen will rise a little later than George. Her morning tasks begin in the kitchen, and the kitchen does not need her until the fires are going, which is George's first task of the morning. He listens to her breathing for a moment, and it is a good sound, a completely familiar and completely comfortable sound, and then he turns carefully and sits on the edge of the bed. The bedroom floor is cold beneath his feet, bare boards, cold in the autumn morning, the cold of them coming through his wool stockings, which he slept in. He sits for a moment in that posture, his hands on his knees, simply being here, simply being at the beginning of the day. The window shows the very first, very faint lightening of the sky. Just a beginning, just a suggestion, but there, and the day beginning to happen whether he sits here or not. And so he stands, and reaches for his work trousers on the chair, and begins. He dresses in the dark bedroom, the heavy cotton work shirt, the braces, the work trousers of thick corduroy, the wool waistcoat, the heavy boots that he laces standing up with the boot propped on the chair, each lace drawn through its holes and tied in the same order as every morning. He moves quietly, not because he is trying to be quiet, but simply because the early morning is a quiet time, and his movements in it are naturally quiet, careful, the movements of a man who is dressed in the dark many thousands of mornings, and whose hands know where everything is. He takes the tallow candle from the mantelpiece and goes downstairs. The stairs creak in their particular places, the third step, the seventh, the bottom step most of all, and these creaks are simply the sounds of the farmhouse being the farmhouse, sounds George has heard every morning of his life in this house, sounds that belong here as naturally as the smell of the house or the sound of the wind in the chimney. The kitchen is cold. The range has been banked the night before. Ellen always banks it carefully before bed, building the coal up in a particular way that holds the heat through the night, and the surface of the range is cool to the touch, the fire within it reduced to a small, deeply buried glow that is there if you open the door and look for it but gives off very little heat. George sets his candle on the kitchen table and opens the range door and looks at the coals. There they are, small, orange, patient, waiting, the same as they always are at this hour. He builds the fire up with the practiced hands of someone who has done this every morning for decades. Small pieces of coal first, placed gently against the glowing remnants, then larger pieces as the fire builds, the draft adjusted, the range door held slightly ajar to encourage the air. The fire responds slowly, as fires do, taking its time about accepting the new fuel, and George waits with the patience he brings to all things that require waiting, which is most things on a farm. While the range builds its heat, George goes to the yard. He pulls on his heavy coat from the hook by the back door, a long, dark wool coat, worn and soft from years of use, smelling of the outdoors and of itself, and his cap, and steps out into the cold morning air. The yard is dark and still. The sky above is lighter than the eastern horizon now, the gray blue of early dawn spreading slowly upward, the stars retreating before it in that unhurried way that stars have of going away in the morning, not switching off, but simply becoming paler and paler until they are no longer visible, absorbed into the growing brightness. The air is cold, a clean, sharp, slightly damp autumn cold that George breathes in and feels all the way down, a cold that is simply the air of the farm in the morning, simply the beginning of the day. He goes to the barn first, as he always does. The barn is the largest building on the farm, its timber frame and brick and tile standing solid and dark against the lightning sky. The door is on wooden hinges, fitted carefully into the frame, and it opens with the particular sound it always makes, a low, wooden, slightly resonant sound, the sound of the hinges and the weight of the door moving, and the smell of the barn comes out to meet him as he opens it. The smell of the barn. It is a deep, warm, complex smell. Straw and hay and old wood and animal. The accumulated smell of a working barn that has held livestock and stored crops for many years. A smell that is entirely itself and can be found nowhere else, and which George has been breathing his whole life, without ever losing his sense of its particular quality. It is a warm smell, a living smell, the smell of the farm at its most essential, and he breathes it without particularly noticing it. The way you breathe the air of your own home, without noticing what it smells like, because it simply smells like itself, like here, like home. Inside the barn, the cattle are in their stalls, 4 cows and a heifer, standing or lying in their deep straw bedding. Their large, warm bodies making the barn several degrees warmer than the yard outside. They hear George come in and turn their heads toward him, their large dark eyes catching the candlelight, their breathing slow and steady, the sound of them in the straw, the occasional shift, the soft rhythmic sound of one of them beginning to chew her cud, filling the barn with the particular comfortable sound of large animals in a warm space. George sets his candle on the shelf he keeps for it and begins his morning barn work. He checks each animal in turn, not quickly, not cursorily, but with the full, unhurried attention of someone who knows these animals individually, who can tell from the look of each one and the way it holds itself, whether it is well or unwell, whether it has eaten its overnight hay or left it, whether anything is different from yesterday. Everything is well this morning. Everything is as it should be. He gives each stall fresh hay from the hay rack, reaching up to the rack above the stall and pulling down a good armful, the hay falling in a soft, loose, golden cascade into the manger below. The hay smells of the summer it was cut in, warm, dry, slightly sweet smell, the smell of dried grass and dried clover and dried yarrow all together, the smell of a July afternoon preserved in this golden material that the cattle pull at with their slow, deliberate mouths. He goes from stall to stall, giving hay, checking water, running his hand along each animal's back as he passes, a brief, matter-of-fact touch that is also a greeting, also a check, also simply the gesture of a man who has lived with these animals long enough that touching them is as natural as not touching them. The cattle eat. The barn is warm. The candle burns on its shelf. Outside, the sky is continuing its slow brightening, the gray becoming a lighter gray, the shapes of the farmyard buildings becoming more distinct against it. Let yourself settle into this warmth. The warmth of the barn, the warmth of the animals, the warmth of a morning that is proceeding exactly as every morning proceeds on this farm, without any event, without any hurry, simply continuing. Your body is so heavy. Your breathing is so slow. The barn is far away in another century, and yet its warmth is somehow here with you. The deep, complex, entirely comfortable warmth of straw and animal and old timber, and the slowly building heat of a morning that has always been happening and is simply happening now. After the cattle, the horses, George's farm has 2 working horses, large, heavy, patient animals named Solomon and Bess, who stand in their stable on the north side of the yard, their bulk taking up most of the space in the 2 stalls. They hear George coming before he opens the stable door. He can hear them moving in their stalls, a slight shifting of large bodies, the sound of hooves on the stable floor. And when he opens the door, they turn their heads to him with the calm, unhurried acknowledgement of horses who are entirely comfortable with the person entering their space. He gives them their morning feed, a measure of oats from the grain bin in the stable corner, poured into each manger with a satisfying, dry, rattling sound, the oats falling in a pale golden stream. The horses lowering their heads immediately and beginning to eat with the focused, steady enthusiasm that horses bring to grain. He fills their water buckets from the yard pump, the water going in with a bright sound, cold and clean. He checks their feet quickly, lifting each hoof briefly and looking at the sole for any stone or crack, and runs the brush along their necks and backs. Not a full grooming, just a few slow strokes of the body brush, the kind of brief daily attention that keeps a working horse comfortable and tells the animal it has been seen and attended to. The pigs next. The pigsty is at the far end of the yard, a low brick building with a small outdoor run, and the pigs, 3 large animals and a litter of half-grown piglets, hear George coming from some distance away and begin their particular vocal expression of anticipation, a low, continuous, conversational sound that pigs make when they expect to be fed, not quite oinking, not quite grunting, just a steady self-expression of interest and desire. He fills their trough from the bucket of kitchen scraps and grain he has brought from the barn, the contents of the bucket going in with a wet, dense sound, and the pigs fall to their breakfast with their usual wholehearted enthusiasm, the sound of their feeding filling the pigsty in a way that is, in its own way, deeply satisfying, the sound of appetite fully met. The chickens are last in the morning rounds. Their house is a small timber building beside the barn, its nest boxes accessible from the outside, its pop hole currently closed. George opens the pop hole, a small square door that he slides upward, and the chickens begin to come out one at a time, cautiously at first, their heads bobbing and turning as they survey the yard, and then with increasing confidence as they decide the yard is acceptable, spreading out across the hard earth in their particular way, scratching and pecking and clucking in their low, continuous, entirely self-sufficient manner. He scatters a measure of grain for them, reaching into the grain bucket and throwing it in a wide arc across the yard, the grain pattering onto the hard earth, the chickens converging on it immediately with their focused, rapid picking motions. He checks the nest boxes while he is here. Not yet time for eggs. The morning is too early, and notes that one of the nest boxes needs fresh straw, which he adds from a bundle beside the chicken house, pulling it apart and spreading it in the box with his hands, the straw settling into a loose, dry, comfortable nest. By the time the morning animal rounds are done, the sky has lightened considerably. The gray-blue of early dawn has given way to a paler, more uniform gray, an overcast autumn morning, the sun not visible, but its presence somewhere behind the clouds evident in the overall brightening of the light, the shapes of the farm buildings now clearly visible, their details resolved from the suggestions of the dark into the full, familiar, ordinary reality of the farmyard in the morning. The air is cold and still, a particular stillness of an overcast autumn morning without wind, when the cold lies evenly on everything and nothing moves, and the farm has a quality of complete, self-contained quiet. George goes back to the farmhouse. The back door opens directly into the kitchen, and the kitchen is warm now. The range has been building its heat for the better part of an hour, and the warmth of it has filled the room. The iron surface of the range now too hot to touch. The smell of the warming iron and the burning coal giving the kitchen a particular morning smell that is part of the smell of home, part of what the morning is. Ellen is at the range, already dressed, her hair pinned, her apron tied. The first of the morning's tasks underway. The porridge pot is on, a heavy iron pot sitting on the range top with its contents slowly beginning to warm, the oats and water in it not yet properly moving, just sitting in the heat, beginning their slow transformation. She does not look up when George comes in. not because she is occupied, but simply because his coming in at this hour is such a fixed part of the morning that it requires no acknowledgement. It is simply part of what happens, part of the rhythm they have both been living in for so many years that the individual moments within it no longer require special attention. He hangs his coat and cap on the hooks and goes to the washstand in the back passage, a plain wooden stand with a china basin and a jug of water, cold but sufficient, and washes his hands and face, the cold water sharp on his face, the soap plain and strong-smelling. The kitchen fills with the smell of the porridge cooking, a warm, deep-grained smell, the smell of oats slowly releasing their starch into the water, becoming something thick and nourishing and plain. Ellen stirs it occasionally with the long wooden spoon, the spoon moving through the thickening contents of the pot in slow circles, the porridge pulling away from the sides of the pot and falling back in a slow, heavy way of something with substance to it. George sits at the kitchen table, the large, plain, scrubbed deal table that occupies the center of the kitchen, its surface worn white and slightly soft-grained from decades of scrubbing, solid on its four thick legs, entirely without ornament. He sits in his chair. There's a particular chair that is his, the one nearest the range, worn smooth in its seat from his sitting in it, slightly tilted from the uneven leg that has been this way for years and has never been fixed because it does not really need fixing. It simply has this slight tilt, and he leans with it. He sits and waits for his breakfast. He does not do anything while he waits. He looks at the table, or at the range, or at the window where the gray morning light is coming in through the glass, the small panes of kitchen window, each showing a slightly different piece of the yard outside, the corner of the barn visible in one pane, the well in another, the gray sky in the others. He looks at these things without any particular thought about them, simply looking, simply being here, simply occupying this moment between the barn work and the breakfast in the warm kitchen while the porridge finishes. Ellen sets the bowl before him, a wide, deep bowl of plain white china, slightly chipped at the rim, the porridge in it thick and pale and steaming, a small knob of butter melting slowly at its center, a dusting of salt. He adds a little more salt from the salt cellar on the table. He picks up a spoon and begins to eat slowly, without hurry, the porridge warm and plain and good. Breakfast in the farmhouse is a quiet meal. George eats his porridge, and then the bread that follows, a thick slice from the loaf Ellen baked yesterday, cut from the round, dark, slightly dense loaf that sits under its cloth on the bread board, sliced with the large bread knife in a slow, careful stroke, the crust giving a slight resistance and the interior yielding, the slice falling to the board with a faint sound. He eats the bread with butter, the butter cold from the dairy, pale yellow, firm, slightly salty, and drinks his tea, which Ellen has made in the large brown teapot that has sat on this table for as long as either of them can remember, its glaze cracked in a network of fine lines, its handle slightly rough where a piece of the glaze has come away, its tea consistently good. Ellen eats her own breakfast at the table while George finishes his. They eat together, but not in any particular communion, simply in the comfortable parallel of two people sharing a meal they have shared many thousands of times, the conversation between them occasional and entirely practical, the weather, which is likely to stay overcast, the north field, which needs attention before winter, a loose board in the dairy that needs mending. These subjects are addressed briefly and without urgency and then set aside, and the meal continues in its quiet way. After breakfast, George goes back out. The morning work has only begun. The fields need attention. The equipment needs maintenance. The hedgerows along the north field have been waiting for trimming since early October and will need to be done before the first frost makes it impossible. He puts on his coat and cap again and goes out into the cold gray morning, and the farm receives him back, as it always does, without comment, simply offering itself, its fields and its lanes and its hedgerows and its familiar smells and sounds, to whatever the day requires of him. The north field is a 10-minute walk from the farmyard, along the lane that runs between the home fields, bordered on both sides by hedgerows of hawthorn and elder and occasional oak trees. The lane itself a track of compacted earth and old grass worn by generations of feet and hooves and cart wheels, its surface hard and slightly uneven. its edges softened by the growth of the hedgerow grasses. George walks it at his usual pace, which is the pace of someone who walks long distances every day, and has learned the pace that can be maintained through a full morning of walking without fatigue. Not fast, not slow, simply steady. The pace of the working countryside, the pace at which everything in the farming life moves. The hedgerow along the lane is thick with autumn. The hawthorn berries are dark red, hanging in dense clusters from the thorny branches, some of them beginning to shrivel with the cold. The elderberries, dark purple-black, hang in their flat-topped clusters, most of them already taken by birds. The bramble leaves have turned, the green going to red and dark purple, the last blackberries long since eaten or rotted. The field maple leaves are yellow, the few still attached to the branches showing pale gold against the gray sky. George walks through all of this without giving it particular attention, because it is simply the hedgerow in October, simply what the hedgerow is at this time of year, as familiar and unremarkable as everything else on this farm. The north field opens before him as he reaches the gate at the end of the lane, a large, flat field of heavy clay soil, its surface recently turned, the long dark furrows of the plowing running from one end of the field to the other in parallel lines, each furrow a sharp edge of turned soil, the surface rough and clod, the smell of fresh earth strong and clean and entirely pleasant. George opens the gate. The gate latch a simple iron catch, the gate a frame of old timber, heavy and slightly twisted, hanging on its iron hinges with a slight downward list, and enters the field. He walks the headland of the field, the strip of unploughed ground around the edges, where the plow must turn, and examines the drainage channels at the field margins, which are part of what needs attention before winter. The channels, shallow ditches cut along the lower edge of the field to carry away the heavy autumn rains, have become partly blocked with accumulated leaf litter and soil, and he crouches at intervals along them and clears the blockages with his hands and a small iron tool he carries in his coat pocket for this purpose, the wet leaf matter coming away in handfuls and being set on the bank beside the channel clearing and deepening as he goes, the water beginning to move more freely through the cleared sections. This is slow work. It requires nothing but time and attention and the simple physical effort of crouching and reaching and clearing, repeated along the length of the channel, perhaps 100 yards in all, each yard requiring 1 or 2 clearings, each clearing a small, practical act that improves the functioning of the field in a modest, incremental way. George works along the channel steadily, without hurrying, crouching and clearing and moving on, crouching and clearing and moving on. The pile of cleared material growing on the bank beside him, the channel behind him clear and running, the work accumulating in its quiet, visible way. The field is quiet around him. From somewhere to the south, a rook calls, a flat, hoarse, carrying sound, and is answered by others, the calls moving across the field from the direction of the elm trees at the field's southern margin where the rookery is, and then falling away, and the field is quiet again. A small flock of fieldfare move through the hawthorn berries at the field margin, working through the clusters with their brisk, purposeful movements, and then are gone, and the hedgerow is still again. The gray sky is above everything, even and still, without any particular feature, simply the sky of this autumn morning, doing what autumn skies do, which is simply to be there, gray and even and quiet. Let yourself be in this field. Let the gray sky be above you, and the smell of the fresh earth be around you, and the quiet of the October morning be there, simply there, not asking anything of you, not requiring you to do anything with it, simply present in the way that fields and skies have always been present, without urgency, without any agenda, simply existing in their large, patient, completely indifferent way. Your body is so heavy and so still. Your breathing is so slow and so easy. The 19th century is very far away, and yet the smell of turned earth and autumn hedgerow is somehow here with you, somewhere at the edge of what you can almost smell, the way a dream has smells that you cannot quite name when you wake. Let it be there. Let it drift past without any need to hold it. George finishes the drainage channel by mid-morning. He stands and brushes the wet earth from his hands and looks back along the length of the channel, which is now clear and running, It's work done for another season. He takes a moment to stand still and look at the field from this end. The long, dark, parallel furrows running to the far hedge, the sky above, the hedgerows on all sides, the quiet. He does this sometimes at the end of a piece of work. Simply stands and looks at what has been done, not with any dramatic feeling of satisfaction, simply noting it, simply registering that the thing is done and the field is in better order than it was an hour ago. He walks back along the lane to the farmyard. The morning has advanced. It is perhaps 10 o'clock. The gray light slightly brighter than it was, the cold still present, but the day beginning to have some warmth to it. The particular gentle warmth of an overcast autumn morning. A warmth that is more the absence of the sharpest cold than the presence of actual heat. Back at the farmyard, the morning's second major task is the hedgerow trimming. George collects his tools from the tool store. The billhook, a heavy, curved blade on a short handle, and the long-handled slasher for the upper growth. Both of them well maintained, their blades sharp and clean, their handles worn smooth, and walks to the section of hedgerow along the lane from the farm to the road that has been growing freely all season and is now spreading considerably beyond its intended width, its branches reaching out over the lane and growing tall enough to interfere with the passage of the hay wagon. Hedgerow work is slow, physical, rhythmic work. George begins at one end of the section and works his way along it, using the billhook for the lower, thicker growth. Each stroke of the billhook a deliberate, controlled cut, the blade going in at the right angle for the particular branch, the cut clean and complete, the cut material falling away, and the slasher for the upper, lighter growth, long sweeping strokes that bring the year's growth down in bundles of twigs and half-dried leaves, accumulating on the ground at the base of the hedge, in a growing heap of light, dry, slightly rusty-colored material. The work makes a particular set of sounds, the thud and scrape of the billhook against branch, the swishing sound of the slasher through the lighter growth, the soft, dry sound of cut material falling to the ground, the occasional crack of a thicker branch. These sounds are contained within the small space of the work and do not carry far. The lane is otherwise quiet. The occasional sound of the farm from the yard behind him, the chickens, the distant sound of one of the horses, reaches him faintly, part of the background of the morning. He works steadily. One stroke, the branch falls. Another stroke, another branch. The hedgerow is reducing in its width and height, being brought back to its working shape, the shape it maintains when it is managed, the dense, tight shape of a well-kept farm hedge. Behind him, the trimmed section is already visibly different from the untrimmed, neater, more compact, the lane wider, the light reaching the bottom of the hedge more fully. The hedgerow trimming takes the rest of the morning. George works through it at a steady pace, resting occasionally, setting down the tools and stretching his back and arms, looking along the lane at the work done and the work remaining, drinking from the water bottle he carries in his coat pocket, a plain stoneware bottle with a cork, the water cold and slightly mineral, the water from the farm well. He rests for perhaps 5 minutes and then picks up the tools again and continues. By the time the work is done, the light has changed. It is past noon, and though the sun is not visible through the overcast, the quality of the gray has shifted slightly. The light at its midday maximum, which on an overcast day is simply a brighter, more even gray. George gathers the cut material into a heap at the side of the lane, raking it with a wooden hay rake that he fetched from the tool store, the rake drawing the scattered twigs and leaves into a rough pile that will dry further and eventually be burned or composted. He walks back to the farmyard for dinner. The midday meal on the farm is called dinner, and it is the main meal of the day, the larger meal, the more substantial meal, the meal that fuels the afternoon's work. Ellen has been preparing it while George has been in the fields, and the smell of it reaches him before he reaches the house. A deep, meaty, vegetable smell, the smell of something that has been cooking slowly for several hours, the smell of the farmhouse kitchen at dinner time, which is one of the most comforting smells George knows. Let yourself settle more deeply now. Let your body sink a little further into wherever you are resting, the surface beneath you warm and entirely supportive, your breathing slow and even and completely effortless, the The dairy is far away, in another century, in another life, and yet its warmth and its sounds are here with you, softly, at the edge of your awareness. The sound of the separator turning, the smell of fresh milk, the warmth of the 4 large animals in the stone room. In the farmhouse kitchen, Ellen is making butter. The cream from this morning's milking has been in the dairy since morning, and she has brought it to the kitchen and poured it into the butter churn, a wooden barrel churn on a frame, its handle turning a set of paddles inside that agitate the cream until it separates into butter and buttermilk. She turns the handle steadily, in the same rhythmic motion, around and around, the churn making its own particular sound, a wet, sloshing, slightly hollow sound that changes as the process progresses, the cream becoming thicker, the sound changing from the free sound of liquid to something more dense, more resistant, as the butter begins to form. This takes a long time. Ellen turns the churn handle for perhaps 40 minutes, steadily, without hurrying, occasionally checking the contents through the small glass window in the churn side, watching the transformation of cream into butter that she has watched many hundreds of times and which is always the same, always following the same stages. Liquid cream, thickening cream, granular butter forming in the buttermilk, growing clumps, and then the full separation, the butter in its mass floating in the cloudy buttermilk. When it is done, she drains the buttermilk, saving it for the pigs and for the week's baking, and removes the butter from the churn and works it on the dairy slab, pressing and folding and pressing again, working out the remaining buttermilk with her hands, salting it, shaping it into the rectangular blocks that will go into the cool dairy. The afternoon progresses slowly. George does his afternoon barn work, checking the cattle again, adjusting the hay in the mangers, checking the water troughs. The evening being still a few hours away, but the afternoon rounds being a fixed part of his day's structure. He checks the equipment in the tool store. A loose handle on the hay fork needs attention, and he works it now with a wooden wedge and a mallet, tapping the wedge into the split in the handle carefully, tightening the fit, testing the result. The mallet makes its small, wooden sound with each tap, not loud, not sharp, just the ordinary sound of a repair being made with the ordinary tools of a working farm. In the kitchen garden, Ellen spends part of the afternoon attending to the last of the autumn vegetables. The kitchen garden is a small, enclosed garden beside the farmhouse, sheltered by a low stone wall on 2 sides, the warm brick of the house on a third. At this time of year it is mostly done. The summer crops long since harvested, the beds prepared for winter, the last of the brassicas standing in their winter-hardy way. She checks the kale and the sprouts, notes what needs harvesting in the next day or two, pulls a few weeds from the bed that will overwinter in parsley, turns the compost with a fork. The garden in October has its own particular beauty, though Ellen would not necessarily think of it in those terms. The cleared beds with their dark soil, the frost-brown stalks of finished plants still standing in a few places, the walls with their moss and lichen, the pale winter sky above it all. It has a quietness, a settledness, a sense of things completed and things preparing, that is simply the garden being the garden in its autumn form, which is as right as the garden in any other form, simply different. The evening comes early in October. By 4 in the afternoon the light is beginning its retreat, the gray sky darkening at its edges, the shadows lengthening across the fields, the temperature dropping noticeably as the afternoon loses what warmth it had. George finishes his afternoon tasks and does the evening barn rounds. The animals settled for the night. Extra hay in the mangers, water checked, the barn door secured, the stable door latched. The animals are quiet at this hour, the cows standing or lying in their deep straw, the horses at their hay, the pigs quieter now than they are in the morning, the chickens already in their house, settled on their perches, the pop-hole closed. The farmyard is quiet in the early evening. The gray light is almost gone. Not dark yet, but going. The shapes of the buildings becoming less distinct, the details fading. George stands in the yard for a moment after finishing the barn rounds, simply standing, his hands in his coat pockets, looking at the sky to the west, where the clouds have thinned slightly, and there is a faint, very faint, pale yellow light at the horizon. The memory of a sunset that is mostly obscured, but not entirely, Just this thin, pale, yellow-gold light at the edge of the western sky, lasting only a few minutes before it fades and the even gray dark of the autumn evening settles over everything. He goes inside. The back door opens into the kitchen warmth, the range going strong. Ellen at it, the supper being prepared, the smell of the kitchen in the evening doing what it always does, which is to be completely and entirely the smell of home, of the end of the day, of warmth after cold, of inside after outside. He hangs his coat and cap and goes to wash, and the farmhouse closes around him for the evening. Supper is simpler than dinner. Cold cuts from the midday stew and fresh bread and a piece of hard cheese and pickled vegetables from a stone jar in the pantry, and it is eaten in the kitchen as dinner was, quietly, without ceremony. The lamp is lit now, the oil lamp on the kitchen table, its warm yellow light making the kitchen smaller and warmer seeming than it is in daylight, the faces of the two people at the table brought into a closer circle of light, the rest of the kitchen in a warm dim. After supper, the brief sitting period of the evening, Ellen mends, she always is mending, a basket of it by her chair, wool stockings and linen shirts and the small domestic repairs that a working farm constantly generates, and George reads the farming journal that comes once a week from the town, or sits with his pipe, a short clay pipe, the tobacco pressed in with his thumb, the flame from a lucifer match held to it carefully, looking at the fire in the range that Ellen has opened the door of slightly, so that its warmth reaches the kitchen. More directly, the kitchen in the evening is the warmest, most enclosed, most comfortable part of the day. The range gives its full heat. The lamp gives its steady light. The sounds of the farm are outside, distant, occasional. The very faint sound of one of the horses from the stable, the sound of the wind beginning to pick up outside, the sound of the house itself settling in the cooling night air. Inside, the sounds are the clock, the fire, the occasional soft sound of Ellen's mending work, the very faint sound of George's pipe. Let yourself be here, in this kitchen, in this warmth, in this simple, quiet evening at the end of a long farm day. Your body is so heavy. Your breathing is so slow. The lamp light is warm and the range is warm, and the sounds of the evening kitchen are there softly, at the very edge of your awareness. The clock, the fire, the mending, the pipe, all of it simply the texture of an evening, simply the ordinary end of an ordinary day. George sets down his journal when the clock shows 9. Ellen puts away her mending. The fire in the range is banked for the night, the same careful banking Ellen does every evening, the coal arranged in its particular way, the draft adjusted to hold the heat through the dark hours without consuming the coal too quickly. The kitchen lamp is turned down and then out. The lamp in the passage is turned down to its lowest setting, just a pilot flame, barely a light, enough to navigate by if needed in the night. They go upstairs. The bedroom is cold. The bedroom fire is not lit on ordinary evenings, the blankets and the body warmth being deemed sufficient, and they are sufficient. The heavy cotton counterpane and the thick wool blankets and the straw mattress all together, making a warm envelope that holds the night cold out. Ellen is in bed first, her hair braided, her nightcap on, her prayer said, not aloud, just her lips moving slightly. The prayer brief and habitual, a nightly practice as unremarkable as washing. George comes to bed shortly after. He sits on the edge and takes off his boots, the same chair, the same sequence as the morning, reversed, and gets under the blankets, and the cold sheets warm quickly against his body, and Ellen's breathing is already settling into the slow rhythm of someone falling asleep, and the bedroom is dark, the one window showing the darkness outside, a darkness that is slightly lighter where the clouds have thinned further and a moon is somewhere behind them. The farmhouse is quiet. The range holds its banked fire in the kitchen below, the warmth of it rising very slightly through the floorboards and the ceiling into the bedroom. Not enough to heat the room, but enough to be felt as a slight mitigation of the cold, a slight sense that the house is not entirely cold, that there is warmth in it somewhere below. The clock in the kitchen ticks on, its sound not audible from the bedroom, or barely so, just the very faintest suggestion of it, a tick so quiet and so distant it might be imagined. The farm is still. The animals in the barn breathe their slow, large, steady breaths. The horses stand in their stable, their eyes half closed. their heads low. They're breathing the deep, regular breathing of large animals in deep rest. The chickens are on their perches, completely still, their heads tucked. The pigs are curled in their straw, round and warm. The fields are dark and still, the turned earth of the north field dark and damp, the pasture pale and the faint moonlight coming through the thinning clouds. The lane that runs from the farm to the road is empty and dark. The hedgerow on its edges is invisible, just a dark mass against the slightly lighter dark of the sky. The gate to the north field stands at the end of the lane, its timber frame barely visible. The road beyond the lane is empty. Everything is in its place. Everything is as it should be. The farm is simply the farm at night, doing what farms do at night, which is to rest, which is to hold its soil and its animals and its buildings in the quiet dark, which is to wait for the morning that will come as it always comes, as it has always come, as it will always come, slowly, from the east, the darkness thinning, the stars fading, the shapes of the buildings emerging from the dark, and George sitting up in his bed and putting his feet on the cold floor and beginning again. But that morning is far away. Right now there's only the night, and the night is long, and the night is quiet, and the night is the particular, deep, country quiet of a farm in October far from any town, a quiet that has a quality you cannot find in the city, a quality of depth and completeness that comes from the absence of mechanical sound, from the absence of electric light, from the simple fact of being in a place where the dominant sounds are natural sounds, the wind in the hedgerow, the occasional sound of an animal in the dark, the sound of the rain when it comes, the sound of nothing when nothing is happening, and where the dominant presence is the presence of the land itself, patient and dark and entirely indifferent and entirely peaceful. Your breathing is so slow, in and out, slow and easy. The farm is far away and the century is far away, and yet the quiet of it is here with you. Somehow, the deep country quiet of a working farm at night, the quiet of the barn and the stable and the kitchen garden and the lane and the dark October fields. Let that quiet be here with you. Let it come in with each breath and stay, settling around you and through you, the way the cold of an October night settles through everything, gently and completely. The night deepens. The moon moves behind its clouds. The wind is picking up slightly now, a faint sound in the chimney stacks, a very slight sound of movement in the hedgerow, but it is a gentle wind, a soft wind, not the wind of a storm, but the wind of an ordinary autumn night, simply the air moving as it always moves, without any particular intention. George is asleep. Ellen is asleep. The house is dark. The farm is dark. The fields are dark. The sky above the farm is dark, thick with cloud, without stars, without moon, simply the deep gray-black of an overcast October night, going nowhere, asking nothing, simply being above everything in its large, patient, entirely unhurried way. Let the night be complete. Let it settle over everything, over the farm and the fields and the lane and the hedgerows and the sleeping animals and the sleeping people in the sleeping farmhouse. Let it be complete and deep and very long, as country nights in October are long, stretching from the early dark of evening through the deep black of midnight and through the slow, almost imperceptible graying of the sky in the very early morning that will eventually become the dawn, that will eventually become the morning that will eventually bring George to the edge of his bed and his feet to the cold floor. But all of that is far away. It is hours away. It is on the other side of a vast, dark, completely quiet night that is stretching out ahead of you and around you and through you, carrying you in its dark, patient arms, asking nothing of you, simply carrying you the way a river carries something on its surface, without effort, without intention, simply moving, simply flowing, simply going in the direction that things flow, which is toward morning, which is toward the day, which is toward the new beginning that always comes and always will. Come, but not yet. Not yet. Right now there is only the night, and the quiet, and your breathing, in and out, so slow, so easy, so completely without effort. The farm sleeps. The fields sleep. The animals sleep. The house sleeps. Everything is still. Everything is warm where it should be warm. Everything is dark where it should be dark. Everything is in its place. Everything is well. The night, the quiet, the farm, the dark fields, the sleeping house. You're breathing. In and out. The clock ticks in the kitchen below. The range holds its banked fire. The horses breathe in the stable. The cows breathe in the barn. The moon is behind the clouds. The stars are above the clouds. Everything is above and below and around and through. And you are here. Warm, heavy, still. You're breathing so slow. In and out, in and out. The night is long. The quiet is deep. The farm is there. And you are here. And there's nothing else. Nothing at all. Just this. The warmth. The dark. The slow breath. In and out. Sleep. Simply sleep. The farm will be there in the morning. The morning will come when it comes. But right now there is only the night. And the quiet. And the warmth. And the slow, easy, completely effortless breath. In and out. In and out. Everything is well. Everything is very, very well. Sleep now. Sleep.